Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about what happened last week with the cabinet reshuffle and so on, and how things are going generally. I think it's fair to say that there's been no improvement in the economy, and there isn't going to be. As I've said many times before, we're in a sort of on a downward slope, and there's no way of actually turning it around. I know that one day we're going to be a world-class technological superpower, but in the meantime, we've got a lot of suffering to do, and I think we're going to have to go right to the bottom before we actually come to our senses, because we have a government which is frankly deluded, and or if they're not deluded, they're trying to delude us. And we have a Prime Minister who's really very weak. He's working very hard, he's very enthusiastic, he's rushing all over the place like a busy little bee, but quite frankly, he's got so little support from his backbenchers, many of whom have already said, it was even Nadhim Zahawi said last week that they're not going to stand again at the next election, so they've got nothing to lose. They can thwart him whenever they want to without risk. And I don't really think he knows what to do, what he can do. And in the meantime, we're getting all this bad news. The strikes are going on, and that's seriously damaging the economy, and because they've been going on for such a long time. We know that in April, that's just 6 weeks' time, electricity and gas prices are going to go up again. We already have some of the highest gas and electricity prices in the world, but they're going to go up again. That will affect businesses and households. I read last week that house repossessions are double what they were last year this time, and again, that's something else which is only going to carry on, because more and more people are going to struggle to pay their mortgages, and people are going to struggle to pay their rents as well, and just generally things are looking very negative. One thing that happened last week, because we're told, of course, that we're going for growth and we're going to get a lot of inward investment and so on. Well, AstraZeneca were planning to build a factory in the UK, and they looked at corporation tax. They found that here corporation tax is 19%, it's going up to 25%, whereas in Ireland it's 15%. And they looked at gas and electricity prices and said, well, no, we'll set up in Ireland. So they're setting their factory up in Ireland. And I think that was a judgment which will be made by many other companies. It seems extremely unlikely to me that companies are going to come and want to invest or build factories or whatever in the UK. There are better alternatives, and there are better alternatives within the EU. So it's very difficult to see how things are going to improve. We were actually, I think the government were rejoicing last week that we're not actually in a recession yet, because technically I think we had zero growth last quarter of last year, which meant that we hadn't had 2 quarters of negative growth, which is what counts as a recession. So anyway, there was this reshuffle last week following the sacking of Nadhim Zahawi. Poor Nadhim. I'm sure he'd look forward to him and his dear wife being Lord and Lady Zahawi. Of course, that's all gone by the board now, and instead of that, he will forever be known as the guy who was accused of trying to fiddle his taxes when he was already extremely wealthy. But anyway, he's gone, and so there had to be a replacement. But instead of a straightforward replacement, Sunak decided to have a bit of a reshuffle. So he broke up the DTI and so on into various departments and made 1 or 2 changes. Replacing Zahawi is Greg Hands, who's a sort of a rather more moderate, you'd say, a southern Tory. But to balance that up, he's made as a deputy or vice chairman of the Tory party, Lee Anderson, Lee 30pence Anderson. Lee Anderson is he's a bruiser. He's a bit of a roughneck. He's a guy who by saying outrageous things gets a lot of publicity, and he loves being on the camera. He's absolutely full of himself. 6 years ago, he was a Labour councillor, but now he's a vice chairman of the Conservative Party. This is Lee Anderson, who who claims that it's possible to make a meal for 30 pence. I'm not quite sure how you can heat a meal for 30 pence, leave alone actually including the food. He's the guy who says that food banks aren't really necessary, but it's just a question that people should manage their finances better. He's Lee Anderson, who when he was out canvassing, he didn't realise the microphone was on. You might have seen the film with Michael Crick, whereby he was about to knock on the door of somebody and he phoned them beforehand and said, pretend you don't know me, but pretend that you were a Labour voter and you now support me. This is Lee Anderson, who thinks we should bring back hanging, and his argument is that no one who's ever been executed has ever committed a further offence, which is 100% proof of how it works. I think he sort of hang people on precaution, really. Just an utter thicker sort of guy. If you meet him in the pub and have an argument, he'd want to sort it out in the car park. Anyway, as I say, he is now the vice chairman of the Conservative Party. Other changes, Sharp's had his change of the week. He's now, I think, in his 9th position. He's now the energy security and net zero minister. He must wonder when he gets up in the morning which department he's got to go to. I mean, he's had nine different cabinet positions. And I think when you're constantly shuffling people, it's so disruptive for the departments and for the civil servants and all the rest of it. It's not very efficient way of governing. Now, amongst the other changes, Michelle Donnellan moved and Lucy Fisher moved somewhere, and nothing of any great significance. But the only other one that was of interest was Kemi Badenoch, who has now been made the Secretary of State for Business, Trade and Growth. Now, she's had no experience of business, so she's absolutely perfect for being a minister responsible for growth. And I'll tell you a little bit about Kemi, because she's just jumped straight into the job right away, and she went off to Rome last week to do some trade negotiations. And I had never heard of this woman until she turned up trying to be Prime Minister when there was a vacancy last year. And I had no idea who she was, never seen her before, never heard her speak or something. But now suddenly she's a prominent minister looking to take over our growth. Anyway, she went off to Rome, and she was interviewed while she was there by Ed Conway from Sky News. And he said to her, what actually is your job? What's your function to do? And she said, and this is exactly what she said, I'm picking up the business facing aspects of the former base department. So that's how she sees her job. And when asked about what she was doing in Italy, she said her top priority is reducing market access barriers. And what this kind of partnership, that's the partnership she was negotiating, allows is a framework to problem solve. So she's gone to Italy to enter into a partnership which will provide a framework to problem solve. So that's all good, isn't it? And so she had her negotiations and so on in Rome for a couple of days, no doubt at great expense, with all her officials and so on living it up, I've no doubt. And at the end there was a big signing ceremony and flags and all the rest of it, and the big desks and so on. And afterwards her department put out a message, and it said this: the UK and Italy have today agreed a momentous, okay, it's big, important, really, really big, important thing, like declaring war, momentous. Agreed a momentous trade partnership to boost UK exports, create jobs, increase wages, and grow the economy. So she's gone to Italy, she's done this deal, which is going to make us all so much better off, increasing wages, exports are going up. Incidentally, exports to Italy, 2019, 17.8 billion, 2022, 15.9 billion. They've gone down since Brexit. They've gone down by 11%. Anyway, she's got this fantastic deal that's going to do all this, increasing exports, etc., etc. Only problem is that Italy is not allowed to do a deal with us, a trade deal. We're not able to do a trade deal with the with Italy. We can only do a trade deal with the EU. Individual countries within the EU cannot do external trade deals on their own. So what this nonsense is, this stuff they're putting out, this guff they're putting out to try and fool us all, is two people signing a piece of paper saying, "It'd be nice if we could do some more business." It's just a con. And this is happening all the time. We're just being fed this rubbish to try and make us think that Brexit is actually, is not a disaster. It's not a catastrophe. Look, we're going to create jobs and increase wages by Kemi Badenoch going to Italy for a couple of days. And after this reshuffle, I had a look at the new cabinet. And there are now 30 members of the cabinet. Now, of those 30 members, 20, that's 2/3, 66% of them, all voted for Remain. Which means that, they're all intelligent people, a lot of them are Oxbridge and so on. They all came to a decision, having thought about it, and since it was such an important decision, they'd given it a lot of thought. They all came to a conclusion that it was more sensible that we remain in the EU. And they probably thought it would be insane if we were to leave, as most sensible people would have. And so they went out and they campaigned and they tried to persuade people and talk to people about how Remain was the answer. And yet when Johnson said, well, if you want to stand as an MP next time, this was in 2019, if you want to stand for an MP, you must be in favour of Brexit. And so they all said, oh, right. Oh, okay, what yes, yeah, what should we say? What have we got to say? Oh, yes, oh, right, okay. And they all suddenly became pro-Brexit. And they will all of them now, they'll go on the television any time to be interviewed and they'll all say what a wonderful thing it is and what opportunities there are and how good it's going to be. In other words, they are all living a lie. They're all conning us. They're all now pretending, lying to us about the benefits of Brexit when they know, in their own considered opinion, when it came to the time to vote, they decided Remain was the best option. Of the other 10 Remainers, 10 who voted to leave, 5 of them are children of immigrants who, for some psychological reason, I presume, are particularly keen to stop anybody else coming to this country and enjoying all the opportunities that they've enjoyed. And they all seem to be extremely anti-immigration, and so we find ourselves being governed by a government, 2/3 of which are telling us all the time that Brexit was the right thing to do, and yet they are knowing, and they knew from the start, and they can see now how they were right all along. How can you be in that position where you're just lying all the time? And this is the government. This is the government of integrity, accountability, and professionalism. And I just don't see how you can go on with a government. Public opinion is just moving so quickly against Brexit, because as we all realise what a disaster it's been. And yet we have this government who agree with us. 2/3 of them agree with us, and yet they're trying to push on with it, trying to not to accept that there's anything wrong with Brexit at all, and to convince us that it's all going to be fine in the end, and we're going to get all these non-existent trade deals and like Badenoch's trip to Italy and so on, and how the world is still our big opportunity and so on. There are three big trading units in the world. There's China, there's the United States, and there's the EU. We've closed our backs on the EU. Our relationship with China hasn't really changed, although it's deteriorating, if anything, because of world circumstances. And there's no chance of us getting a deal with America anytime soon. Probably not for quite a long time. So, there is no future. There's no future in trade deals all over the world, as much as they may want to just go on and on about it. So anyway, that's what I think about it. I think we're being deceived by this government, a government that doesn't believe what it's doing. We've got an opposition, of course, who can't wait to jump in and take over and make a great success of it all. But either way, it's really doomed. And that's why I know these videos of mine are pretty depressing, pretty negative, but there is no way of turning this round. There is no way of ever making a success of Brexit. There's no way of turning it round. And I suspect and I fear that we're going to have to go right to the bottom and get really, really, really poor and really in financial trouble before we come to our senses and actually decide to change our policy and try to find some way of getting back closer to Europe, or trying to negotiate some sort of deal whereby we can trade with them a bit more freely. But as things are, it's pretty negative, I must say. So on that cheery note, if you've listened this far, thank you very much indeed. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mind doing so. And so until next time, bye for now.